Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Have you ever felt that deep desire, that yearning for something you've worked so hard for, only to have it snatched away by something completely unfair? Or maybe you've carried that nagging fear, that little voice whispering doubts when you should be celebrating a victory? We all have, right? That ache of wanting something so badly, the sting of injustice, the knot of suspicion in your gut. These feelings, they're part of being human. Today, we have a story that hits right at the heart of those emotions. It's a story about a man with a dream, a simple desire to buy a car, something he had every right to do. But what happened next? It twisted into a moment of blatant disrespect, a moment that made his blood boil and his heart sink. A car dealership actually called the cops on him. Yes, you heard that right. Called the cops on a man trying to spend his hard-earned money. But hold on, because this isn't just a story of injustice. Oh no, there's a turn, a moment of instant regret for those who acted so wrongly. A moment that proves you can't judge a book by its cover. A moment that will leave you speechless. Let's dive in to see exactly how this unfolded. Our story centers around a man named Elijah. Elijah was a hard-working carpenter, a man who poured his sweat and soul into every piece of wood he touched. For years, he'd been saving, pinching pennies, dreaming of the day he could finally trade in his old, sputtering pickup truck for something reliable, something that wouldn't break down on the way to a job site. He wasn't looking for anything fancy, just something dependable. Finally, that day arrived. With a decent chunk of money saved, Elijah felt a surge of pride and excitement. He'd done it. He'd achieved a goal he'd set for himself. He spent weeks researching online, comparing models, reading reviews. He finally settled on a mid-sized SUV at a dealership in a neighboring town called Oak Haven. It seemed perfect for his needs, offering enough space for his tools and the reliability he craved. So, one sunny Saturday morning, Elijah drove his old truck to Oak Haven Motors. He walked onto the lot, his heart filled with a quiet sense of accomplishment. He spotted the SUV he'd seen online, gleaming under the sunlight. A salesman, a young man with a slick-back hairstyle and a forced smile named Chad, approached him. "Can I help you, sir?" Chad asked, his tone lacking any real warmth. "Yes, I'm interested in taking a look at that SUV over there," Elijah replied, pointing towards the vehicle. Chad's smile seemed to falter slightly as his eyes scanned Elijah from head to toe. Elijah, dressed in his usual work clothes, a comfortable t-shirt and jeans, slightly dusty from his morning work, felt a prickle of unease. "Was there something wrong? Do you have an appointment?" Chad asked, his voice now carrying a hint of suspicion. "No, I don't," Elijah said, a little surprised. "I just saw it online and wanted to take a look." "Well," Chad drawled, his eyes still lingering on Elijah's attire, "our SUVs are quite popular. Are you serious about buying?" Elijah's unease started to morph into something else, something akin to anger. "Yes, I am serious," he stated firmly. "I have the money for a down payment right here." He gestured to his pocket, where his savings were safely tucked away. Chad's expression didn't change. He still seemed doubtful, almost dismissive. "Look, sir," he said, his tone condescending, "I just don't want to waste my time if you're not really a buyer. Maybe you should look at some of our older models." He gestured towards a row of clearly less desirable, older vehicles in the back lot. A wave of humiliation washed over Elijah. He felt his face flush. Was this really happening? Was he being judged based on how he looked? He took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. "I am interested in that SUV," he repeated, his voice tight with controlled frustration. "I want to see it, and I want to talk about the price." Chad sighed dramatically, as if Elijah was causing him a great inconvenience. "All right, fine," he said reluctantly. "But don't get your hopes up. These things go fast." As Chad led Elijah to the SUV, his body language spoke volumes. He kept a noticeable distance, his eyes darting around as if he expected Elijah to suddenly cause trouble. Elijah felt a knot of hurt forming in his chest. He'd worked so hard, and this was how he was being treated? They reached the SUV, and Elijah tried to focus on the vehicle itself, running his hand over its smooth exterior. He tried to ignore Chad's dismissive attitude, but it was difficult. Every glance, every sigh from the salesman felt like a slap in the face. Elijah asked a few questions about the features of the SUV, but Chad answered curtly, barely making eye contact. It was clear he didn't believe Elijah was a serious buyer. The suspicion in his eyes was palpable. Then it happened. As Elijah was looking at the interior of the SUV, Chad suddenly pulled out his phone. Elijah glanced at him, a question in his eyes. "I'm just going to call and check something," Chad mumbled, turning his back slightly. Elijah waited, a bad feeling creeping into his stomach. What was he checking? Was he calling about the SUV? Or was it something else? Something that made his blood run cold with a sudden, sickening realization. A few minutes later, another man, older and wearing a crisp suit, approached them. This was Mr. Henderson, the dealership manager. His face was stern, his eyes cold. "Sir," Mr. Henderson said, addressing Elijah, his voice firm, "we've had a report of suspicious activity. We're going to have to ask you to leave the premises." Elijah was stunned. "Suspicious activity? What are you talking about?" he asked, his voice rising in disbelief. "We have reason to believe you're not a legitimate customer," Mr. Henderson stated flatly. "And we've contacted the authorities. They'll be here shortly." The words hit Elijah like a physical blow. They called the cops on him? For trying to buy a car? Because of how he looked? The injustice of it was staggering. His hands clenched into fists, and he struggled to contain his fury. "This is unbelievable," Elijah exclaimed, his voice shaking with anger and hurt. "I have the money. I was just looking at the car. What right do you have to treat me like this?" Mr. Henderson remained impassive. "We have to protect our business. We can't just let anyone wander onto the lot." "Anyone?" Elijah repeated, the implication hanging heavy in the air. He knew what they meant. He knew it in the way they looked at him, the way they spoke to him. It was because he was a black man in work clothes, and they had immediately judged him, assumed the worst. As Elijah stood there, his heart pounding with a mixture of rage and despair, a police car pulled up to the dealership. 2 officers stepped out. "This is him," Chad said, pointing at Elijah with a smug look on his face. The officers approached Elijah, their expressions neutral but cautious. "Sir, we've received a call about a disturbance." "I wasn't causing any disturbance," Elijah protested, his voice filled with righteous anger. "I was trying to buy a car. They're the ones who are causing trouble." One of the officers listened calmly as Elijah explained what had happened. He looked from Elijah to Chad and Mr. Henderson, his eyes assessing the situation. Just then, something unexpected happened. A sleek, black sedan pulled into the dealership parking lot. A well-dressed woman stepped out, her eyes scanning the scene with a look of concern. It was Mrs. Albright, the owner of Oakhaven Motors. She had been out of town, but had received a frantic call from a longtime employee who witnessed the interaction between Chad, Mr. Henderson, and Elijah. This employee, a kind-hearted older mechanic named Walter, was deeply troubled by what he saw and knew Mrs. Albright would be furious. Mrs. Albright walked over to the group, her expression serious. "What in the world is going on here?" she demanded, her gaze sweeping over the police officers, Chad, Mr. Henderson, and finally landing on Elijah. Mr. Henderson stepped forward, trying to explain their side of the story, painting Elijah as a suspicious individual. But Mrs. Albright held up her hand, cutting him off. "I want to hear it from him," she said, her eyes fixed on Elijah. Elijah recounted his experience, his voice still trembling with emotion. He spoke of his hard work, his savings, his excitement at finally being able to buy a new car, and the humiliating way he had been treated. He didn't hold back his feelings of being judged and racially profiled. As Elijah spoke, Mrs. Albright's face grew increasingly pale. She listened intently, her eyes filled with disbelief and then a dawning sense of horror. When Elijah finished, the silence hung heavy in the air. Mrs. Albright turned to Chad and Mr. Henderson, her voice dangerously low. "Is this true?" she asked, her gaze piercing. Chad stammered, trying to defend his actions, but Mr. Henderson remained silent, his face ashen. Mrs. Albright didn't need confirmation. She had heard enough. She turned back to the police officers, her voice filled with apology. "Officers, I am so incredibly sorry for wasting your time. There has been a terrible misunderstanding. This gentleman was a legitimate customer, and he was treated appallingly by my staff." The officers exchanged glances, clearly surprised by this turn of events. One of them addressed Elijah. "Sir, we apologize for the inconvenience. If you'd like to file a formal complaint." "No," Elijah said, shaking his head. "I just want them to understand what they did was wrong." Mrs. Albright stepped forward and addressed Elijah directly, her voice filled with genuine remorse. "Sir, I am beyond words. What happened here is absolutely unacceptable, and it goes against everything this dealership stands for. I can't even begin to express how sorry I am that you had to experience this." She then turned to Chad and Mr. Henderson, her voice sharp and filled with disappointment. "Effective immediately, both of you are suspended. We will be conducting a full investigation, and I can assure you there will be serious consequences." The shock on Chad's and Mr. Henderson's faces was evident. They hadn't expected this swift and decisive action. Mrs. Albright then turned back to Elijah, her eyes pleading for understanding. Mr. Elijah, he supplied quietly. "Mr. Elijah," she continued, "please allow me to make this right. That SUV you were interested in, it's yours, free of charge, as a sincere apology for the disgusting way you were treated. And I will personally ensure that you have a smooth and respectful experience from this moment forward." Elijah was stunned into silence. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. Free of charge? A brand new SUV? Chad and Mr. Henderson looked on in disbelief, their faces a mixture of shock and anger. They had instantly regretted their actions, but they never imagined it would lead to such a dramatic and costly consequence. Their prejudice had not only humiliated an innocent man, but had also cost them their jobs and the dealership a significant amount of money and reputation. Elijah, still reeling from the events, looked at Mrs. Albright, his heart filled with a complex mix of emotions: anger, hurt, disbelief, and now a flicker of hope. What would Elijah do? Would he accept Mrs. Albright's generous offer? Would he walk away from this place that had caused him so much pain? Or would he see this as a chance for justice, a chance to show them that they were wrong about him? This story, my friends, reminds us that appearances can be deceiving. It highlights the insidious nature of prejudice and how quickly snap judgments can lead to terrible mistakes. It also shows us the power of empathy and the importance of standing up for what is right. What are your thoughts on this story? Have you ever experienced or witnessed something similar? Share your experiences and your location in the comments below. Let's create a space for open and honest conversation. And if you found this story thought-provoking, please hit that like button. It helps us reach more people and share stories that matter. Thank you for being here, and remember, treat everyone with kindness and respect. You never know their story. Stay tuned for more compelling stories right here on our channel. We appreciate each and every one of you. Now, let's continue with Elijah's decision. Elijah stood there, the offer hanging in the air. He looked at the gleaming SUV, the very vehicle that had been the center of such a humiliating experience. Part of him wanted to refuse, to walk away and never look back. He didn't want their pity or their guilt-ridden generosity. He had wanted to buy this car with his own hard-earned money, with pride, not as a consolation prize for their bigotry. But another part of him, the part that had dreamed of owning a reliable vehicle for so long, felt a pull towards the offer. It wasn't just about the car anymore. It was about accountability. It was about making them understand the gravity of their actions. By accepting this offer, wasn't he, in a way, forcing them to confront their prejudice in a tangible way? He looked at Mrs. Albright, her face etched with sincerity and a deep sense of shame. He saw the genuine distress in her eyes, and he knew that she was truly appalled by the behavior of her employees. After a long moment of contemplation, Elijah spoke, his voice quiet but firm. "Mrs. Albright," he said, "I appreciate your offer. It's more than generous, and I believe you are sincere in your apology." He paused, taking a deep breath. "I will accept the SUV, not as charity, but as a symbol that shows that prejudice has consequences. A symbol that reminds everyone that judging people based on their appearance is wrong." A collective sigh of relief seemed to sweep through Mrs. Albright, and even the police officers. Chad and Mr. Henderson, however, remained silent, their faces still etched with disbelief and resentment. Mrs. Albright's eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you, Mr. Elijah. You have no idea how much this means to me. I promise you, this will never happen again at Oakhaven Motors. We will be implementing mandatory diversity and sensitivity training for all our staff, and we will be reviewing our policies to ensure that everyone is treated with respect and dignity." She then turned to Walter, the mechanic who had called her, and gave him a look of heartfelt thanks. Walter nodded slightly, a quiet sense of satisfaction on his face. The paperwork was quickly arranged, and within an hour, Elijah was driving off the Oakhaven Motors lot in his brand new SUV. As he drove, he looked in his rearview mirror, catching one last glimpse of the dealership. He felt a sense of closure, but also a lingering sadness that such a thing had happened in the first place. The news of the incident spread quickly through the small town of Oakhaven. Many people were outraged by the way Elijah had been treated, and there was a significant backlash against the dealership on social media. Mrs. Albright's swift action in apologizing and offering the SUV free of charge helped to mitigate some of the damage, but the stain of prejudice remained. Chad and Mr. Henderson were eventually fired after a thorough investigation. Their actions served as a stark reminder to others about the importance of treating everyone with respect, regardless of their background or appearance. Elijah, meanwhile, used his new SUV for work and for his personal life. Every time he got behind the wheel, he was reminded of the injustice he had faced, but also of the unexpected turn of events and the apology he had received. He hoped that his experience would serve as a small step towards a more just and equitable world. The moral of this story, my friends, is clear. Prejudice blinds us to the truth and leads to harmful and often costly mistakes. Judging others based on stereotypes not only hurts the individual, but also damages the reputation and integrity of those who harbor such biases. True character lies not in appearances, but in the content of one's heart and the integrity of one's actions. Let us all strive to see beyond the surface and treat each other with the respect and dignity we all deserve. Thank you for listening. Please share this story with others, and let's continue to have conversations that promote understanding and empathy. Until next time, take care.